It is tough to fight the establishment. It's tough, especially if you're for freedom these days, and slowly political correctness works its way through our establishments. And nothing is more established than the Law Society of Upper Canada. You can even hear it in their name. Now they've modernized it. Now they call themselves Ontario. They're getting with the times. But this is the highest heights of the legal profession in Ontario. It regulates all lawyers. It elects senior lawyers to manage the affair of lawyers. They're called benchers. And frankly, being elected a bencher is usually a precursor to becoming a judge. These are the fanciest of the fancy people. Try fighting them over a politically correct battle. You are fighting Goliath. But what happens if you actually win? And joining us now in studio is a man who stood on principle for freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression against the benchers establishment. And he won, and here to explain it to us is our friend Sam Goldstein. Great to see you again. It's
Great
been
to
a
see
long
you.
time.
Yes, yes.
First of all, you now are a bencher of the Law Society.
I am.
That's
I'm the fanciest of the fanciest.
I was going to say, I don't think we've ever had someone that fancy on this show before.
No.
I mean, you carry yourself humbly, but how many lawyers are there in Ontario?
There are, I think there are about 47,000 lawyers.
God.
And now the Law Society of Ontario, as it was changed a couple of years ago, also regulates paralegals as well. So I'm just going to say legal professionals.
Right.
And there's about 56,000 legal professionals in Ontario. I could be off on my numbers.
And how many benchers, as you're called, are there regulating these 56,000 people?
Right, so there are 52 or 53, I can't remember my specific numbers.
But it's not a huge number.
Yeah.
You're like a city hall, really, for lawyers.
But the reason why is because there's a breakdown. There are 40 benchers elected who are lawyers, 20 from inside Toronto, 20 from outside of Toronto.
Right.
And then there are 7 lay people who the provincial government appoints. And then there are 5 paralegal, so it's 52.
All right, well that's very interesting, and really you govern the profession, is that right?
Yeah, so we're a board of directors essentially. It's a not-for-profit, non-share issuing organization.
But you have a lot of power too. You can disbar a lawyer, for example, if they misbehave. You really regulate, instead of politicians regulating lawyers, you really have the power to regulate other lawyers.
Yes, and you just pointed out an important feature of it. We were the first self-regulating body, and we're one of the very few self-regulating bodies. And what I mean by self-regulating bodies is of the legal profession. So in other jurisdictions in the world, the law societies there are actually, they don't exist. The government, like as in England, actually regulates the lawyers. In Canada and Ontario, we are still self-regulated, and our mandate under the Law Society Act, the fundamental core terms is that we're supposed to make sure that lawyers are competent and lawyers are ethical. And there's a discipline tribunal. I'm actually sit as an adjudicator on the discipline tribunal.
So it's like you're a judge.
Yes.
You're a judge who just judges lawyers.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now,
and we can revoke their licenses, as you pointed out.
Now, whenever there's this much power, and when you're dealing with powerful people like lawyers, who in society are, wealthier, more politically connected, they're powerful people, there will be politics, especially on the regulatory side, because imagine exercising control over those 56,000 legal professionals. And that's where you came in with your fight. Now, I don't want to misstate it, so maybe you can tell our viewers, what was the battle about? What was this great battle about freedom of conscience? Because that's the kind of stuff we care about here. And to know that there was a battle, a clash of the titans, bencher versus bencher. You guys are the masters of the universe when it comes to law and even judges. And the way court cases go and the way you can represent people. There was a brutal battle in the Law Society, wasn't there?
Yeah. First of all, I thank you for your flattery about being powerful.
Well, over the legal profession, you are.
Yeah. So I think that lawyers often inflate our own sense of role in society. But yes, as you point out, we regulate the lawyers. And what happened a number of years ago was that there was a statement of principles that was adopted by convocation. Convocation is what's called the assembly, like the House of Commons.
It's like the parliament of the lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. And they voted that all lawyers would have to adopt a statement of principles. And those statement of principles were essentially illiberal ideas. We can get to them in a moment. And 22 of us ran on a slate. And in the last bencher election, which was last year, the benchers are elected every 4 years, and all 22 of us got elected.
So it was like a political party running for the Parliament of Lawyers, and 22 out of 22 of your people won.
Yes.
I find that incredible.
Yeah, look, it truly is incredible.
And the reason, and we haven't told people about this statement of principles, because you just say statement of principles, well, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. But it's what those principles were. I mean, if the principles were be honest, don't steal, fight for justice, who wouldn't support that? But it's what was jammed into the statement of principles that made it so prickly, right? Yeah,
so the statement of principles were really about these warm, fuzzy words, these motherhood issues about diversity, inclusion, and equity. They sound great words. Who wouldn't be in favor of those words? But it was the meaning behind them. And frankly, as someone who is a free speech advocate like yourself, it doesn't matter whether I have to say something good or if I have to say something bad. The point is I have a charter right. That charter right says that I don't have to say things that I don't believe in. It also says I don't have to say things even if I do believe in them. That's a very fundamental point. We have a right we have a right for expression, and we also have a right against compelled expression.
Isn't that an interesting point? Because you're right, the word diversity, well, first of all, that's a word that can mean different things to different people. To me, intellectual diversity is important. Other people, the only diversity they care about is racial or sexual or characteristics that I don't think we should judge each other on. But really, it's a Trojan horse for whatever the political power of the day says you have to believe. That's my thoughts on diversity.
No, it's absolutely, and I prefer to, when we talk about diversity of ideas, I actually prefer to talk about pluralism.
Oh, that's good.
And when we're talking about diversity, because diversity is really about this intersectionality of trying to say that there is a hierarchy of people out there, of victims, and it's based upon race, and we have to give priority to those people on the top of the list in terms of the victimhood Olympics, the gold medals of the Olympic victimhood races. And I object to that. Now, I don't see anything wrong with multiculturalism, right? I don't see anything wrong with having different, and I don't say racialized, which we'll get to in another moment.
That's a very weird word that's reasonable.
I say, look, we've already talked about ethnic minorities and religious minorities. I think it's important to provide protection for ethnic and religious minorities.
But that's got nothing to do with compelling someone to make certain platitudes.
Correct.
To say something. That's what's weird. Like telling a lawyer, you can't be racist, you can't be discriminatory. I think I've got time for that. But telling a lawyer he has to testify, I am a diversity activist, or whatever the actual manifestation was, that's where it gets weird and compulsive, and compulsion. That's the compulsion, right?
Yeah. We'll put it this way: there was compulsion because if you didn't sign on to these diversity principles, then they could sanction you. Now, the Law Society first intimated that they would sanction people, revoke people's licenses.
Really? Literally.
Yes.
Take away a man's livelihood if he didn't sign on to some.
And then they backtracked a little bit and they qualified it. So either it actually meant something, that you were actually believed in your diversity ideas, and you were going to punish people if they didn't go along with what you wanted, or you're just saying people just tick something off, don't worry about it, in which case you don't believe, you don't have the courage of your convictions.
You're exactly right. I mean, first of all, if you believe in diversity, isn't one species of diversity not signing on to a statement? Like, if you actually believed in diversity, you would let someone not be like you.
Yeah.
And if you forced someone to make some statement. What's the value of a compelled? That's like a jailhouse confession where you're forced to sign. If a lawyer doesn't believe it, what's even the point of it?
Well, I think it highlights the intolerance of the social justice warriors and the progressives who existed on convocation.
Sam, you're using language that I use too. It's quite something for me to see this language in a bencher, and your party, I'm going to call it a party, your slate.
Well, we're call this slate.
A slate. Stop, SOP. That's that
was what we called
statement
ourselves.
of principles.
Yeah.
And 22 out of 22 of you won in the election. Was there a slate against you? Was there a social justice warriors slate against you, or were you sort of the dissidents against everybody?
You know, certainly when we started running, there was a lot of pushback from those people who believed in the statement of principles, and there's still pushback because we can get to that.
Well, they can believe it in their own heart, but why do they?
But they didn't run. But they didn't run a slate against us, and basically, you know, people just discounted us. People didn't think we were going to win. People criticized us for our beliefs.
I didn't think you were going to win. How could you beat the benchers?
Are you a member of the Law Society still? You paid me?
No, I'm no longer a lawyer.
Please pay your fees. You can vote for us next election.
I mean, and that's not me disparaging you. I just thought, how can you fight the benchers? How can you fight the Law Society?
Well, let me tell you something about that. So we went around and we were looking for people to join us, and it was very hard because people were afraid of us. Because it's not just, you talk about the legal establishment, it's not just the Law Society, but it's also the legal publications out there are very much in favor of whatever the Law Society is promoting at the time. So it was very hard to be treated seriously by like the Law Times or by even other legal, the Canadian Lawyers magazine, right? You were constantly publishing articles interviewing people, then the former Treasurer Paul Shabas or the now Treasurer Malcolm Mercer, who dismissed us. And if you just give me a moment, I really want to mention Michael Miniar of London, Ontario, who started the website, the Stop SOP website. And it was initially to oppose the adoption of the Statement of Principles by convocation. And they phoned me up one day and asked if I would join the group because I had been writing I'm a columnist for a small legal publication called The Lawyers Daily. And I had been writing against the SOP for a period of time, and they asked if they could use one of my articles, and that's how I got in with them. We lost the vote ultimately because the convocation voted to adopt it, and after that they were like, what should we do? And I said, well, look, we've got about 600 names on this website, if not more. Why don't we now turn this into a political movement and run as benchers?
You're an activist. I love it.
Well, you know, and so we did. And a year later, we recruited people. But people initially, as I said, were afraid to join us. No one thought we were going to win. And I remember driving up to Newmarket Courthouse. I had a case up there. And my wife phoned me up and she said, congratulations. And I said, oh, well, I won. Like, I was surprised, and I was concerned. Like, who else won, right? I got the 5th highest votes in Toronto.
Wow!
And then she phoned me, and she said she'll look, and then she said everyone won.
Unbelievable! That's like a fairy tale come true.
Yeah.
I mean, I followed it. I thought, well, these guys, they're bravely fighting, but they're going to retreat. They're going to be killed. It's going to be a wipeout. This gives me hope, Sam, because this tells me that maybe there are some people who still understand freedom and independence and the right to be a dissident, the right to be a dissenter. It gives me a little bit of hope in the legal profession that frankly is a flickering flame for me right now. Is that flame going to be blown out? And if you came in number 5 in the whole city, there's a lot of lawyers in Toronto. It's a very progressive city.
Yeah.
If you came in top 5, I find that very encouraging.
Well, I think it also shows that the profession didn't want this, and the profession is concerned the Law Society is engaging in this mission creep and going beyond what it really should be doing. The other thing I think we should point out to your viewers is that in the end we did defeat the Statement of Principles. There was a very long convocation back last year, and I think it was in June.
I love that
and it went on
for convocation. It sounds like almost the cardinals meeting to select a pope, like convocation, white smoke coming out of the chimney. Are these convocations private, or are they on the record, or what are they like?
Well, they're publicized. I think they're on the website of the Law Society. You can watch them.
I think I've seen some clips from them, but it sounds very fancy, like the high priests getting together. So you had this convocation, and the statement of principles was
very divisive. It was a very divisive
it's a divisive
convocation.
issue.
Yeah. And in fact, the reality is that the law society continues to be very divisive.
Yeah.
There's many subjects which we're discussing. I mean, we continue to try and fight against these social justice warriors and the so-called progressivism at the Law Society. And, you know, we're trying to reduce lawyers' fees. We reduced them by $250 this year. There was fight back on that. Nima Hajodi, who is this young lawyer who is the head of the equity group at the Law Society, complained that money should have gone towards equity issues. And so we're getting a lot of pushback on the many different topics that we're trying to fight. Just recently, we talked about how this equity group that has a permanent seat on the equity committee of the Law Society was tweeting all these spurious accusations against a fellow bencher, a colleague of mine who's on the slate, and the Law Society wouldn't censure him.
So the Law Society itself is tweeting against an elected bencher of the Law Society.
Well, it's not the law. He's not a bencher. He's appointed by this group called the Equity Group, which is like a Trojan horse inside the Law Society. It has special status on one of the committees. The rules apparently that I'm bound by a bencher code of conduct, but he's not bound by a bencher code of conduct. And when we pointed out this anomaly to the convocation, the last meeting just 2 weeks ago, instead of saying, "Oh, this is a problem, we should solve it," they ignored it and said, "Well, we're going to table the issue. We're not going to talk about it," because equity isn't about equality; it's about special status.
Yeah, you know, all these funny words. The more opaque the word, the more can be jammed through them. Equity,
Absolutely.
Diversity. Now, you said you have 22 folks on your slate, and out of 57. So, of the other 35, are all of them really weaponized on this subject, or are some of them just normal folks?
You know, a good question as well. You know, there are two paralegals who tend to see our point of view, and then there are a number of lay benchers who, despite the fact that we're appointed by the provincial government, and voted against the statement of principles, so voted with us in terms of trying to defeat it, they've bought into this diversity stuff. Yeah. And it's a bit disappointing to see that.
So and the thing is, diversity, I mean...
Well, let me just one more, so sorry to interrupt you, but you have to understand that, you know, as you know, it's very hard to take sensible positions these days because you're accused of all types of horrible things. Accused of being racist and so on. And no one likes to be called racist. And I truly believe that and I know this to be the fact, that there is a group of benchers who didn't necessarily agree with the statement of principles and the other recommendations that this report put forward. But they felt pressured and bullied by other people who did believe in this to go along with it. So if you don't support these equity causes, these diversity issues, despite the fact that for very good logical reasons, you're not engaged with on any sort of reasonable basis. It's just all ad hominem attacks. So if I may just continue. So Murray Klippenstein is a guy who has worked for Indigenous Canadians. He was one of the lawyers on the G20 suing the government at the time, really involved in progressive causes. And he looked at this report by this company, Stratcom, that the Law Society hired, which laid the foundation for the statement of principles. And he went through the analysis, and it showed that the entire analysis of the Stratcom report is invalid. And no one has actually engaged with him on any reasonable level. That no one's criticized his analysis. They've only criticized him. It's all these ad hominem attacks on him.
So
and
is
that's
he part
basically
of your
what
slate?
you get. Yeah, Murray is part of our slate.
So if you've got a guy who's fighting the
he got the most votes in Toronto.
Really?
Yeah.
The most votes?
He got the most votes.
So Klippenstein sounds Jewish.
He's not, he's Mennonite.
He's Mennonite, okay. I'm glad I checked.
Yeah.
But my point is, he's fighting the G20 fight. I'm taking it on the side of the protesters?
Yes.
Okay, so that's that's not even liberal. That is liberal, but that's also left-wing, progressive, whatever word.
Look,
and he's for the indigenous people.
He represented the Dudley George family in the Ippewash.
Wow.
He sued Mike Harris.
That's incredible. I mean, he is right out there on the front lines of progressive public interest law. And for him to say this diversity BS is BS, surely that's got to make some other folks shake their head. If this guy who's out there fighting these like that's way out there, and he's against this.
And here's something else he's just recently done. I mean, I love Murray. I'm very proud of him. I'm so glad to be his friend. And it's very funny how this issue brought us together.
I'd say, because you're on the conservative side of the aisle.
On the conservative side of the aisle. But Murray recently won a case in the Superior Court in Ontario. He's representing a number of Indigenous communities in South Africa against a mining company. And he's claiming that this mining company in South Africa was raping these Indigenous women. And he just won a motion which allows him to sue this mining company in Toronto, in Ontario.
I think that was just in the last week or so, wasn't it?
About a month ago.
So that's an extremely prominent case that anyone who cares about minorities, racial minorities, the poor, they ought to say, well, this Klippenstein's a hero.
Yeah.
If he is worried about this statement of forced diversity, you've got to say he's got enough bona fides. We can't just call him racist. Are they calling him racist?
Yeah.
It's incredible. He's probably done more for these. If he represented Dudley George, he's done more for the downtrodden minorities, whatever, than any of his critics, I bet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, it's funny when people call me these names because fundamentally, as a classical liberal, my main concern is with the low-income earners, with the poor people, and making sure there's no discrimination.
Well, that's who your clients are.
Well,
mainly, partly.
I know I'm a criminal lawyer, but I try and do some private clients, not just legal aid. But look, I'm also a national legal advisor for B'nai B'rith, Canada, right? And I always have believed and still believe that you have to prevent discrimination is wrong, but it's discrimination based upon prohibited grounds. Right? It's on an individual basis. Here, this will be very surprising to you. Who said that the best way to protect group rights is to protect individual rights?
I don't know.
Pierre Trudeau.
Did he? You have surprised me.
In his essay, French Canadians and Federalism, in his collection of essays from La Cité, the magazine.
You know what?
He wrote that back in the 60s. Yeah.
And he nailed it.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to
You'll have to adopt that now.
I'm going to start using that. Yeah. That's the most enlightened thing I've ever heard ascribed to Trudeau.
Because you protect individual rights, and then you let those individuals decide which parts of their identity are prominent or not. We don't tell people that they're black. We don't tell people that they're Jewish. We let people,
blue-eyed, whatever. That's whatever you think is important about you.
Listen, I mean, to start judging people by the color of their skin or their religion was a bad idea 50, 60, 70 years ago, and it's still a bad idea. And you can call it what you want, you can dress it up as you want, but it's still a bad idea. And I will continue fighting for individual rights.
I tell you, Sam, I am so impressed with, and I've learned so much here today, and I'm still a little, I'm very proud and excited to have a bencher on Rebel News. I bet you're going to get sort of complaint. I bet you're going to get a complaint about it. So you're saying that the big election was last year, and it's a 4-year term.
Yes.
Do you think that there'll be a counter-revolution? Do you think that the other side is going to regroup and try and beat you guys in the next election, or have they said, okay, maybe we were wrong?
You're good at this.
I don't know. I'm just wondering.
No. It's a good question again. From what I understand, I think there will be organization against us. I think they will run their own slate. We're always looking for donations to run the campaign for next year, the Stop the SOP.
What's your website?
You know what? I think it's stopsop.com or stopsop.ca.
We'll check it out. We'll put it on the screen whenever.
But yes, I do think there'll be pushback. I think, when we won, the Malcolm Mercer Treasurer and other people sort of dismissed us as some sort of fluke, right, in the electoral system. And they said, oh, you don't really represent the majority of people.
Boy, you just told me Klippenstein got more votes than anyone else in Toronto.
Yeah, and interesting enough, Malcolm Mercer, remember there are 20 lawyers from Toronto. Malcolm Mercer came in 20th.
Oh, and he's telling you and your team, you came in 5th, your buddy came in 1st, and he's criticizing your credibility.
Yeah, top 5 people in Toronto were all we're all slate members.
All 5 of the top 5.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, all 10, I believe.
And he's calling that a fluke.
Yeah.
There's a Jewish word for that. It's called chutzpah.
In any case, I suspect that there will be, they may very well try and organize against us and run their own slate, but bring it on, because I think, You know, I think there is a silent majority out there.
Well, and at least call it what it is, rival political ideas. And
Yeah.
I would rather have them in a slate and defined by who they are than sort of sneak it through like they were doing before.
Yeah, well, you know, I will admit that I'm a little, I mean, I think it's sad, really, that convocation is becoming politicized the way it is. I actually don't think that's good for the profession in the long run, but I think it's the reality of what's happened.
Disagreement with you is I would say it was politicized, only now is it politically accountable.
Well, look, it was certainly politicized and was politicized. We didn't start it. They started it.
Yeah.
Right? And I agree with you there. And our slate is a reaction. It's a response to what they've done. But going forward, I think it will continue to be politicized. And I hope, my goal, is to be able to win all 40 seats in next convocation.
And you're not imposing your ideology on people. The opposite. You're 40 people to say, we don't want an imposition of politics on us. Let's just go practice law.
Yeah, because the law, there's a misconception in what's happened through this politicization of it, and through Malcolm Mercer trying to argue that there's an expanded mandate for the Law Society, is you've been able to incorporate all these politics into it, all this sort of illiberal ideology. But the reality is it's a regulatory body. Yeah. If you want to go out and change the world, then run for office, run for public office. The Law Society, as I said before, its fundamental core mandate is to make sure that lawyers are competent and lawyers are ethical, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, it's not a political platform.
No.
Very interesting. Well, I've learned so much here today, and the number one thing I've learned is that sometimes you can hope. Sometimes you can beat City Hall, or in this case, something much fancier than City Hall, the Law Society. Listen, it's great to have you here. Was there anything else you wanted to tell us? Because I know you got some notes and you were reviewing them. Did we cover the? You
covered the basics. Look, there's more to talk about. I think fundamentally, these diversity ideology is bad for the law. It's eroding the presumption of innocence. But maybe that's a conversation for another time.
Well, let me give you a standing invitation to help us understand the law. And I think you elocuted very well. I think our people are interested in the law. We do some law in our own way here at Rebel News. I believe in some ways we're transforming into a public interest law firm. We're fighting for free speech. We're standing up for people that we think are neglected. In fact, our legal expense is our second largest expense here at Rebel News, and I don't even mind because I think we're fighting the good fight.
Well, Ezra, I said off camera that I think a great loss for the legal profession is that you became a journalist and not a lawyer. You're a very bright guy. You're very eloquent. You would have made a great litigator. You would have made a great member of our slate and a bencher.
Well, it's very nice of you to say those things in our own way. I think we are practicing some of the ideas that you've outlined there.
But invite me back. I'll talk about the law.
Listen, standing invitation, we should make this a regular thing. Our viewers are interested in the law, and especially from your point of view. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
All right, cheers. Well, there you have it. Sam Goldstein, the leading force behind Stop SOP, and a bencher of the Law Society of Ontario, and I learned that his freedom slate just swept it. Isn't that amazing? That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.